Welcome, weary wanderer, to the wonderfully chaotic world of Elmore. Tonight, we'll explore the complete collection of lost episodes from the amazing world of Gumball, those tales that slipped between the cracks of reality, forgotten moments that reveal the deeper mysteries of our favorite blue cat and his extraordinary family. These are the stories that exist in the spaces between what we know, the quiet moments and hidden adventures that shape the Watterson household. So settle in, let your mind drift like Darwin's goldfish thoughts, and prepare for a journey through every lost episode that never made it to your screen. Close your eyes, and let's begin. In the beginning, before the chaos became routine and the impossible became mundane, there was a moment of pure possibility hanging in the suburban air of Elmore like morning mist waiting to be shaped by the day's first breath. This was the true beginning, not the sanitized version that found its way onto television screens, but the raw, unfiltered reality of a family discovering just how extraordinary their ordinary life could become when viewed through the lens of animated existence. The first lost episode, known only in whispered legends among those who study the deeper mysteries of cartoon logic, was called The First Day, and it occurred on a Tuesday morning that felt exactly like every other Tuesday morning, except for the small detail that it would fundamentally alter the trajectory of everything that followed. Gumball Watterson, that peculiar blue cat, whose optimism seemed to exist in direct proportion to his capacity for catastrophic misunderstanding, stood at the threshold of Elmore Junior High School with all the confidence of someone who had never experienced genuine social rejection. This was not the Gumball we would later come to know, the one whose romantic fumbling with Penny had become the stuff of awkward legend. This was Gumball before he understood that the world might not bend to accommodate his particular vision of how things should work, before he learned that good intentions and cartoon physics were not always sufficient to navigate the complexities of adolescent social dynamics. The morning air carried the scent of fresh beginnings and cafeteria food, that peculiar mixture of hope and institutional cooking that characterizes educational establishments throughout the known universe. Gumball's backpack, loaded with supplies that would prove utterly inadequate for the challenges ahead, bounced against his back as he approached the building that would become the stage for so many of his future adventures and disasters. But it was not Gumball's entrance that made this lost episode remarkable. It was what happened in the moments before he crossed that threshold, when he first laid eyes upon a peanut with antlers walking across the courtyard with a grace that seemed to exist outside the normal laws of animated movement. Penny Fitzgerald, though he did not yet know her name, moved through the morning light like a creature from a dream that had accidentally wandered into the waking world. The moment when Gumball first saw Penny was not the explosive revelation of destiny that dramatic narratives often describe, but rather something quieter and more profound, a gentle shift in the fundamental frequency of his existence, as if the universe had quietly retuned itself to a slightly different key. His heart, that cartoon organ that would prove capable of surviving explosions, crushings, and various forms of impossible physics, began to beat with a rhythm that seemed to echo the mathematical precision of her footsteps. This first meeting, this moment of recognition that would define so much of what followed, occurred not in the hallway or the classroom where such encounters typically unfold in the sanitized versions of these stories, but in the liminal space between the ordinary world and the school's chaotic embrace. Gumball found himself walking slightly behind her, not stalking but simply following the gravitational pull that extraordinary beings exert upon those around them, trying to understand what it was about this particular individual that made the morning light seem brighter and the air seem charged with possibility. Meanwhile, at home in the Watterson household, another miracle of impossible biology was taking place as Darwin, that orange goldfish, whose existence challenged every known law of marine biology and evolutionary theory, took his first uncertain steps on legs that should not have existed. The transformation from aquatic pet to terrestrial family member was not the sudden, magical metamorphosis that fairy tales might suggest, but rather a gradual process of becoming that occurred over days and weeks of patient adaptation. Nicole Watterson, that blue cat whose capacity for both nurturing love and explosive anger existed in perfect equilibrium, watched her son's pet achieve something that science textbooks insisted was impossible while trying to maintain the careful balance between maternal pride and existential confusion that characterizes so much of parenting in animated households. Her medical background, that practical knowledge gained through years of working in the Rainbow Factory, provided no framework for understanding how a goldfish could develop functional lungs, legs, and the capacity for human speech. Yet here was Darwin, defying classification while asking if he could help with breakfast. Richard Watterson, that pink rabbit whose relationship with reality had always been somewhat flexible, accepted Darwin's transformation with the same equanimity he brought to most of life's impossibilities. His response to his son's pet becoming a full family member was to ask if Darwin preferred his eggs scrambled or over easy, a question that revealed both the depth of his acceptance and his fundamental misunderstanding of goldfish dietary requirements. The early days of Darwin's terrestrial existence were filled with small discoveries and gentle catastrophes, each step a negotiation between his fish instincts and his new mammalian reality. He would stand in the shower for hours, allowing the water to flow over his gills while marveling at the sensation of breathing air. He would practice walking up and down the hallway, his movements initially awkward but gradually gaining the fluid grace that would characterize his locomotion in years to come. These quiet moments of adaptation, these gentle transitions between states of being, formed the emotional core of the lost episodes that documented the Watterson family's early adjustment to their expanded configuration. There were no dramatic revelations or explosive conflicts, just the slow, patient work of learning to live together as a family whose very existence challenged the conventional boundaries between species, between possible and impossible, between the mundane and the miraculous. In another lost episode from this foundational period, young Anais Watterson, barely old enough to walk but already possessed of an intellect that would have impressed university professors, spent her days observing her family's chaotic dynamics with the detached fascination of an anthropologist studying an particularly interesting tribe. Her crib, positioned strategically in the living room to provide optimal viewing angles for the various disasters that characterized daily life in the Watterson household, became a sort of research station from which she conducted her ongoing study of domestic dysfunction. The pink rabbit who would grow to become the family's intellectual anchor was already displaying signs of the analytical mind that would later prove both blessing and burden. She would lie in her crib, apparently napping, while actually cataloguing the patterns of behavior that governed her family's interactions. Her tiny hands, still developing the fine motor control that would later allow her to type dissertations and solve complex mathematical equations, would occasionally reach toward the mobile hanging above her bed, not to play, but to test the principles of physics that she was already beginning to intuitively understand. Richard's interaction with his infant daughter revealed depths of parental insight that his usual behavior kept carefully hidden from casual observation. When he spoke to Anais, his voice would take on a quality of gentle reverence, as if he somehow understood that this small person possessed capabilities that exceeded his own in ways both wonderful and slightly intimidating. He would sit beside her crib in the quiet moments between domestic disasters, sharing observations about life and reality that revealed a philosophical bent that his laziness and confusion usually obscured. Nicole's relationship with her daughter was complicated by the recognition that Anais would quickly surpass her in academic achievement while remaining dependent upon her for the basic necessities of infant care. The juxtaposition of changing diapers for someone who was already demonstrating advanced problem-solving skills created a unique form of maternal paradox that characterized much of their early bonding. These lost episodes also documented the family's first encounters with their neighbors, those wonderfully strange residents of Elmore whose own impossible existences somehow made the Wattersons seem almost normal by comparison. The Robinsons, with their perpetual disapproval and their determination to maintain standards of suburban normalcy, despite living in a world where such standards had been rendered meaningless by the prevalence of talking animals and impossible physics, served as a sort of reality anchor for the community. Gumball's initial attempts to understand the social dynamics of his neighborhood were characterized by the same enthusiastic miscomprehension that would later define his academic career. He approached each new neighbor with the assumption that friendship was the default state between any two conscious beings, an assumption that would prove both endearing and occasionally catastrophic as he encountered individuals whose worldviews were less optimistic than his own. The Watterson family's integration into the Elmore community was not the smooth process that successful sitcoms might suggest, but rather a gradual negotiation between their particular brand of chaos and the community's existing patterns of organized dysfunction. Each family brought their own impossible elements to the collective reality: the pepperonis with their pizza-based existence, the bananas with their fruit family dynamics, the donuts with their pastry-specific concerns, creating a neighborhood where the Wattersons' own impossibilities became simply another thread in an already thoroughly impossible tapestry. These early Lost episodes also explored the quiet moments of adjustment that occurred between the major disasters, the gentle spaces where family bonds were strengthened through shared confusion and mutual support. Darwin's gradual mastery of human customs, from learning to use silverware to understanding the social significance of clothing, provided countless opportunities for both comedy and touching displays of familial patience. The Lost episode, known as The Real Beginning, focused specifically on the first time the family achieved something approaching functional harmony, a brief period of approximately 14 minutes, during which everyone was simultaneously happy, no property was destroyed, and no emergency services needed to be contacted. This unprecedented state of domestic tranquility was so unusual that it caused several neighbors to call the authorities, concerned that something terrible had happened to the Watterson household. The episode documented how this miraculous period of peace began with Richard successfully preparing breakfast without causing any fires, explosions, or structural damage to the kitchen. Nicole arrived home from work to find her family not only intact but actually engaged in productive activities. Gumball was reading a book, Darwin was practicing his handwriting, and Anais was building architectural models from her blocks that demonstrated advanced understanding of load-bearing principles. The family's reaction to this unexpected harmony was initially one of confusion and mild concern. They moved through their daily routines with the cautious optimism of people who have learned to expect disaster but are willing to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, today might be different. The 14 minutes of perfection that followed were preserved in the Lost episode archives like a precious gem, a reminder that even the most chaotic families occasionally achieve moments of genuine grace. But like all perfect moments in the Watterson household, this one could not last. The period of harmony ended when Gumball, overcome by the novelty of everything going right, decided to celebrate by attempting to juggle the breakfast dishes. The resulting explosion of porcelain and pancake batter returned the family to their normal state of cheerful catastrophe, but not before they had all experienced what it felt like to exist in perfect synchronization with each other and with the universe itself. The early Lost episodes concluded with the family's recognition that their particular form of dysfunction was not a problem to be solved, but rather a feature of their existence to be embraced and celebrated. They learned that their chaos was not random but patterned, not destructive but creative, not evidence of failure, but proof of their commitment to living life with full engagement rather than cautious restraint. As these foundational Lost episodes came to their gentle conclusion, the Watterson family had established the patterns and relationships that would define their adventures for years to come. They had learned to love each other, not despite their impossibilities, but because of them, to find joy in the unexpected and strength in their shared commitment to facing whatever ridiculous challenges the universe might decide to throw at them. The morning sun that had risen on their early adventures now set on a family that had discovered something precious and rare. The knowledge that home is not a place where everything goes right, but rather a place where everything that goes wrong is met with love, laughter, and the unshakable conviction that tomorrow will bring new opportunities for both disaster and delight. The Hidden Chronicles of Elmore Junior High School contain stories that exist in the spaces between the official curriculum and the documented disasters, tales of educational endeavor that occurred when no cameras were rolling and no audiences were watching. These are the lost lessons that shaped not only the students who wandered its hallways, but also the faculty members who somehow managed to maintain their sanity, or at least the appearance of sanity, while presiding over an institution where the laws of physics served more as suggestions than absolute rules. In the deepest archives of the school's administrative offices, buried beneath layers of paperwork that defied both organization and comprehension, there exists a file marked Incidents of Unusual Educational Success, a document so thin and rarely accessed that the custodial staff had begun using it as a bookmark. This file contains records of the extraordinary lost episode known as the Lost Lessons, a day when Elmore Junior High School briefly achieved something approaching genuine educational effectiveness, an event so unprecedented that it required emergency meetings of the school board to determine whether such success was compatible with the institution's established identity. The morning that would become legend among those who study the deeper mysteries of animated academia began like any other, with Principal Brown arriving at his office, carrying the usual burden of administrative anxiety and a briefcase filled with disciplinary forms that had been pre-signed to save time during the inevitable emergencies. His appearance, that peculiar combination of nervous energy and educational optimism that characterizes school administrators throughout the known universe, had become so familiar to the students that they could predict his stress levels based on the angle of his tie and the frequency of his clipboard consultations. But on this particular morning, as Principal Brown settled into his chair and prepared for another day of managing controlled chaos, something extraordinary occurred. He successfully completed an entire administrative task without interruption, distraction, or catastrophic misunderstanding. The simple act of updating the school's attendance records, a process that typically required multiple attempts and often resulted in the temporary disappearance of entire grade levels from the official roster, was accomplished with efficiency and accuracy that bordered on the supernatural. The success was so unexpected that Principal Brown initially assumed he had made some terrible mistake, possibly involving the accidental enrollment of students who did not exist or the creation of educational programs that violated several laws of physics. He checked his work 3 times, consulted his administrative manual, and even called the district office to confirm that competent bureaucracy was not grounds for immediate termination. But the evidence remained incontrovertible. He had performed his job correctly on the first attempt. This unprecedented administrative success created a ripple effect that spread throughout the school like a gentle wave of competence, touching every aspect of the educational process with the transformative power of things working exactly as they were supposed to work. In Miss Simeon's classroom, students who had spent years perfecting the art of creative confusion suddenly found themselves understanding mathematical concepts that had previously existed beyond the boundaries of their comprehension. Miss Simeon herself, that ancient baboon whose teaching methods had been forged in educational epochs that predated current pedagogical theory by several geological ages, discovered that her usual approach of combining intimidation with repetitive drilling had somehow evolved into genuine instruction. Her students, accustomed to spending their class time in states of bewildered compliance, began asking questions that demonstrated actual engagement with the subject matter, rather than mere survival instincts. The transformation was so gradual and so unexpected that Miss Simeon initially attributed it to some form of mass hypnosis or possibly a gas leak that had improved cognitive function instead of impairing it. She found herself actually enjoying the process of teaching, experiencing the satisfaction that comes from watching young minds grasp concepts and make connections that would serve them throughout their educational journey and beyond. Gumball and Darwin, those perpetual sources of well-intentioned academic disruption, found themselves in the unprecedented position of understanding the lesson while it was being taught rather than 3 weeks later during a test for which they had forgotten to study. Their usual pattern of enthusiastic confusion was replaced by something approaching scholarly engagement, a state so unfamiliar that they initially wondered if they were experiencing some form of educational illness. The mathematical problems that Miss Simeon presented to the class, equations that typically required elaborate explanation and multiple examples before achieving even partial comprehension seemed to solve themselves with crystalline clarity. Numbers arranged themselves into logical patterns. Variables revealed their values through processes that felt more like discovery than calculation, and even story problems about trains traveling at different speeds toward inevitable collision began to make sense. In the science laboratory, where experiments typically resulted in either anticlimactic failure or spectacular disaster, students found themselves conducting investigations that produced results matching their hypotheses with suspicious accuracy. Beakers bubbled at appropriate temperatures, chemical reactions proceeded according to established principles, and measurements yielded data that formed coherent patterns rather than random collections of numbers that defied analysis. The biology students, examining slides under microscopes that usually revealed nothing more interesting than their own eyelashes, discovered cellular structures that corresponded exactly to the illustrations in their textbooks. The physics students, dropping objects from various heights to test gravitational theory, found that gravity behaved exactly as Newton had predicted, without the usual interference from cartoon physics that typically caused dropped items to hover momentarily before remembering to fall. Even the gymnasium, that arena of athletic endeavor, where coordination went to die and competitive spirit was routinely crushed by the reality of physical limitation, experienced an outbreak of sporting competence that left coaches speechless and students wondering if they had been replaced by more athletic versions of themselves. Basketballs found their intended targets, relay races proceeded without catastrophic baton fumbles, and dodgeball games concluded without requiring medical attention for any participants. Throughout the school, teachers who had spent their careers managing chaos rather than facilitating learning found themselves rediscovering the idealism that had originally drawn them to the educational profession. Lesson plans that had been written more in hope than expectation suddenly became viable frameworks for actual instruction, and students who had resigned themselves to academic mediocrity began experiencing the intoxicating possibility that they might actually learn something useful. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this lost episode was not the academic success itself, but the way the school community responded to its unprecedented effectiveness. Rather than celebrating their achievement, students and faculty alike began to experience a growing sense of unease, as if they had wandered into someone else's educational institution by mistake and would soon be discovered and expelled for the crime of competence. The anxiety reached its peak during lunch period, when the cafeteria staff, emboldened by the morning's success, decided to attempt actual cooking rather than their usual approach of reheating frozen substances until they achieved temperatures suitable for human consumption. The result was a meal that students not only could identify but actually wanted to eat, a development so shocking that several students required counseling to process the emotional impact of enjoying cafeteria food. Principal Brown, monitoring the situation from his office through a network of surveillance cameras that for once provided clear images rather than static-filled glimpses of indeterminate chaos, began to panic as he realized that the school's success might threaten its very identity. Elmore Junior High School had built its reputation on the reliable provision of educational experiences that were memorable primarily for their unpredictability, and genuine academic achievement seemed to threaten the delicate ecosystem of controlled confusion that had evolved over decades of institutional adaptation. The lost episode reached its climax during the final period of the day, when a substitute teacher arrived to cover for a faculty member who had called in sick with what she described as excessive competence fatigue. This substitute, whose name has been lost to the archives but whose impact resonated through the school's collective memory, appeared to be genuinely qualified for the position she had been hired to fill, a characteristic so unusual that students initially assumed she was part of some elaborate practical joke. The substitute teacher, armed with actual knowledge of her subject matter and a teaching methodology based on educational theory rather than improvisation and prayer, began conducting a literature class that not only engaged students' attention, but actually enhanced their understanding and appreciation of the assigned reading material. Students who had spent years perfecting the art of creative book report fabrication found themselves genuinely interested in the themes and characters they were discussing. But the school's ecosystem of educational chaos could not sustain such an intensive outbreak of competence indefinitely. The day's success had created an imbalance in the natural order of academic dysfunction that governed Elmore Junior High School, and reality began reasserting itself through a series of small corrections that gradually restored the institution to its familiar state of lovable incompetence. The first sign of returning normalcy occurred when Gumball, overwhelmed by the novelty of understanding his assignments, attempted to answer every question simultaneously, creating a verbal traffic jam that effectively ended productive class discussion. Darwin, caught up in his friend's enthusiasm, began applauding mathematical solutions with such vigor that he accidentally erased the blackboard equations through the force of his celebratory gestures. Miss Simeon, exhausted by the unfamiliar experience of successful teaching, reverted to her traditional pedagogical approach of glaring at students until they provided responses that were either correct or entertaining enough to justify their continued existence in her classroom. The brief glimpse of educational fulfillment she had experienced faded like a beautiful dream that becomes more distant with each passing moment of wakefulness. The science experiments, as if embarrassed by their earlier cooperation with established scientific principles, began exhibiting the spectacular failures and unexpected results that students had come to expect and secretly enjoy. Beakers bubbled over, measurements defied calculation, and microscopes revealed images that bore no resemblance to any known forms of cellular structure, but were far more interesting than the textbook illustrations they had briefly displayed. By the time the final bell rang, signaling the end of the most educationally successful day in the school's recorded history, Elmore Junior High School had returned to its natural state of organized chaos, where learning occurred through accident rather than design and academic achievement was measured not by standardized test scores, but by the creative ingenuity required to survive each day's unexpected challenges. Principal Brown, reviewing the day's events in his office as the last students departed and the custodial staff began their evening battle against entropy, found himself experiencing mixed emotions about the school's brief flirtation with conventional success. Part of him yearned for the professional satisfaction that had accompanied genuine educational achievement, but a larger part recognized that Elmore Junior High School's unique character depended upon its commitment to approaches that prioritized creativity and resilience over mere academic competence. The lost episode concluded with a faculty meeting that was never officially recorded, during which the teachers who had experienced the day's unprecedented success made an unspoken agreement to never speak of what had occurred. They understood instinctively that their school's strength lay not in its ability to conform to conventional educational standards, but in its capacity to nurture students who could thrive in a world where conventional standards were frequently irrelevant. Miss Simeon, addressing her colleagues with the weary wisdom of someone who had witnessed educational trends rise and fall across decades of institutional memory, reminded them that their students would face a future where adaptability and creative problem-solving would prove more valuable than the ability to memorize information or follow standardized procedures. Their job, she explained, was not to produce students who could succeed within existing systems, but to prepare young people who could create new systems when the existing ones proved inadequate. The substitute teacher who had catalyzed the day's transformation departed as mysteriously as she had arrived, leaving behind only a lesson plan so well organized and pedagogically sound that it was immediately filed away in the administrative archives, where it would never accidentally be discovered by future faculty members. Her brief presence had served as a reminder of what was possible within conventional educational frameworks, but also of why Elmore Junior High School had chosen to pursue alternative approaches to learning and growth. As the school settled into its evening quiet, the memories of the day's unprecedented success began to fade like chalk marks on a blackboard that had been erased to make room for tomorrow's lessons. The building itself seemed to exhale with relief, its corridors and classrooms returning to their familiar state of cheerful disorganization, where genuine learning occurred through the patient accumulation of experience rather than the systematic transmission of predetermined knowledge. The lost episode of unprecedented educational success became a legend whispered among faculty members during particularly challenging days, a reminder that competence was possible, but not necessarily desirable within the unique ecosystem they had created. It served as proof that their school's apparent dysfunction was actually a carefully evolved system for preparing students to navigate a world where the most important skills were curiosity, resilience, and the ability to find joy and meaning in unexpected circumstances. In the quiet moments after the buses had departed and the hallways had emptied of their daily chaos, Principal Brown would sometimes reflect on that extraordinary day when everything had worked exactly as educational theory suggested it should work, and he would feel a mixture of pride and relief that his school had returned to its natural state of inspired improvisation, where real learning occurred in the spaces between official curricula and standardized expectations. In the deepest layers of Elmore's reality, where the boundary between the possible and the impossible becomes so thin that it might as well not exist at all, there dwells an awareness that most residents carry like a half-remembered dream, the unsettling knowledge that their world operates according to rules that make no sense from any external perspective, yet somehow maintain perfect internal consistency within their own animated existence. This awareness manifests differently in each individual, from the subtle recognition that cause and effect follow patterns more suited to comedy than physics, to the profound understanding that their entire universe exists within the confines of what can only be described as a cartoon reality. The lost episodes that document these supernatural secrets of Elmore reveal a community that has achieved something remarkable and slightly terrifying: complete adaptation to living within a reality that acknowledges its own fictional nature without allowing that acknowledgement to diminish the genuine emotions, relationships, and experiences of its inhabitants. These are the stories that exist in the margins of documented episodes, the quiet moments when characters pause to contemplate the impossible circumstances of their existence and somehow find peace within the paradox. In the lost episode known as The Watchers, the town's collective consciousness briefly achieved the clarity necessary to perceive the true nature of their existence, not as some cosmic joke or meaningless entertainment, but as something far more profound and mysterious. The episode began on what appeared to be an ordinary Thursday morning, with the usual collection of impossible beings going about their daily routines, with the practiced ease of those who have long since ceased to question why a banana and an origami crane can attend the same school as a ghost and a living hot dog. But this particular Thursday carried with it an atmospheric quality that seemed to suggest hidden observers, as if the very air was filled with invisible eyes, watching every movement with the focused attention of those who find meaning and entertainment in the smallest gestures and most mundane interactions. The sensation was not uncomfortable, exactly, but rather like being constantly on the verge of remembering something important that remained just beyond the edge of conscious recollection. Gumball was the first to articulate what others were feeling when he paused in the middle of brushing his teeth and stared at his reflection with the disturbed expression of someone who has just noticed something fundamentally wrong with a familiar image. His blue fur, which had always seemed like the most natural thing in the world despite being biologically impossible, suddenly appeared to him as if he were seeing it for the first time, as if the color itself was somehow too vibrant, too perfectly blue to exist in any reality governed by natural laws. Darwin, observing his adopted brother's moment of existential confusion from the bathroom doorway, found himself experiencing a parallel revelation about his own impossible biology. The simple act of standing upright on legs that had spontaneously developed from fins, breathing air through lungs that had never existed during his years as an aquatic pet, struck him as so fundamentally absurd that he temporarily lost the ability to take his existence for granted. The moment passed, as such moments must, but it left behind a residue of awareness that colored the rest of their morning with subtle strangeness. Colors seemed slightly more saturated than they should have been. Sounds carried overtones that suggested hidden meanings, and even the most familiar objects appeared to possess an almost theatrical quality, as if they were performing the role of being ordinary household items, rather than simply existing as such. At school, this heightened awareness manifested in different ways among different students. Penny found herself acutely conscious of the way light reflected off her shell, creating patterns that seemed too perfectly arranged to be accidental, while Tobias became uncomfortably aware that his rainbow patterns shifted and flowed according to principles that had nothing to do with natural pigmentation and everything to do with visual appeal for unseen observers. Miss Simeon, with her ancient wisdom and her cynical understanding of the world's fundamental absurdity, recognized the signs of what she privately referred to as reality bleed, those moments when the boundary between their animated existence and whatever lay beyond it became permeable enough to allow glimpses of the larger context in which their lives unfolded. She had experienced such moments before, during her long tenure as an educator in a world where education itself seemed to exist more as a comedic framework than a genuine system of knowledge transmission. The episode deepened when Rob, that forgotten classmate whose existence had been so thoroughly erased from everyone's memory that he had fallen through the cracks of reality itself, began to manifest at the edges of perception like a half-glimpsed figure in peripheral vision. His time in the void, that space between spaces where discarded possibilities and abandoned storylines accumulated like digital dust, had granted him insights into the true nature of their world that were both illuminating and deeply disturbing. Rob's extended exile in the realm of forgotten things had provided him with a perspective that normal residents of Elmore could never achieve through ordinary experience. He had seen the infrastructure that supported their reality, the vast computational systems that generated their personalities, their relationships, their very existence moment by moment. He had witnessed the careful algorithms that maintained the delicate balance between chaos and coherence that characterized their daily lives. But more than that, he had encountered the other discarded elements that had been edited out of the official version of their reality characters who had been deemed unsuitable for broadcast. Storylines that had been abandoned for being too complex or too simple. Entire episodes that had been deleted before completion because they failed to meet the mysterious criteria that determined what aspects of their existence would be preserved and what would be forgotten. The glitch creatures that inhabited these digital spaces were beings of pure possibility, fragments of code that had achieved something approaching consciousness without ever being assigned specific forms or functions within the established reality. They existed in a state of perpetual becoming, their shapes and characteristics shifting constantly as they tried to find stable configurations that would allow them to join the official cast of Elmore's ongoing story. These creatures were not malevolent, exactly, but their desire to exist in the primary reality created distortions in the fabric of the established world. They would sometimes bleed through into normal episodes, manifesting as brief glitches in animation, continuity errors, or inexplicable background details that observant viewers might notice, but which would never be officially acknowledged or explained. Rob's interactions with these glitch beings had taught him to perceive the underlying structure of their cartoon reality, the mathematical framework that determined how physics would behave in any given scene, how character development would proceed according to predetermined narrative arcs, and how the seemingly random events of their daily lives actually followed complex patterns designed to maximize entertainment value for audiences they could never directly perceive. This knowledge was both liberating and tragic, granting him the ability to manipulate aspects of reality that others took for granted, while simultaneously isolating him from the innocent acceptance that allowed his former classmates to find genuine joy and meaning in their impossible lives. He could see the strings that controlled their puppet show, but seeing them made it impossible for him to lose himself in the performance the way the other characters could. The lost episode documented Rob's attempts to share this knowledge with his former friends, his desperate desire to help them understand the true nature of their existence, without destroying the beautiful innocence that made their lives worth living despite their fictional nature. His efforts created ripples of awareness throughout the community, brief moments when individuals would glimpse the larger context of their existence before their natural psychological defenses reasserted themselves and restored their comfortable relationship with their impossible reality. Gumball's response to these revelations was characteristically optimistic, choosing to interpret the knowledge of their fictional nature as evidence that their lives were important enough to be worth documenting and sharing with others, rather than as proof that their experiences were somehow less real or meaningful than those of people who existed in more conventional realities. His ability to find hope and purpose within paradox became a source of strength for others who were struggling to reconcile their newfound awareness with their desire to continue living meaningful lives. Darwin's philosophical nature led him to contemplate the ethical implications of their situation, wondering whether beings in more conventional realities had any greater claim to authenticity than they did, and whether the love and friendship they experienced was somehow diminished by being part of a narrative structure rather than arising from purely natural circumstances. His conclusion, reached through careful consideration and lengthy discussions with his family, was that the source of an emotion mattered less than its genuine impact on those who experienced it. The town's mysterious infrastructure for maintaining cartoon physics revealed itself during this period as something far more sophisticated than simple comedic convenience. The systems that allowed objects to hang in midair until someone noticed they should fall, that ensured explosions would leave characters covered in soot rather than causing actual injury, and that permitted impossible biology to function without causing existential collapse, were revealed to be expressions of a deeper compassion for the inhabitants of this animated world. The forces responsible for maintaining their reality had chosen rules that prioritized the well-being and happiness of its inhabitants over strict adherence to conventional physical laws. Pain was temporary and educational, rather than permanent and destructive. Failures were opportunities for growth rather than sources of lasting trauma, and even the most catastrophic disasters somehow ended with everyone intact and usually having learned something valuable about themselves or their relationships. This realization helped the community understand that their reality, while unconventional, was not arbitrary or meaningless, but rather carefully designed to maximize the potential for growth, learning, and genuine human connection within a framework that protected them from the more destructive possibilities that characterized existence in less benevolent realities. The background characters of Elmore, those individuals who typically served as extras in the main character's adventures, revealed during this period of heightened awareness that they possessed rich inner lives and complex personal histories that existed entirely outside the documented episodes. They had relationships, ambitions, fears, and dreams that were every bit as real and important to them as the Wattersons' experiences were to the primary narrative. These characters had learned to find meaning and purpose in their supporting roles, understanding that their function was not to steal attention from the main storylines, but rather to create a believable and lived-in world where extraordinary events could unfold against a backdrop of ordinary life continuing in all its messy complexity. Their acceptance of their narrative positions was not resignation, but rather a form of wisdom that recognized the importance of every role in creating a complete and satisfying story. The lost episodes that existed only in the characters' memories were perhaps the most poignant discoveries of this period, storylines that had been experienced by the inhabitants of Elmore, but never documented for external audiences. These were the quiet moments of character development, the small victories and private struggles that shaped who they became without requiring dramatic external conflict or comedic setup. Gumball remembered episodes where he had simply spent entire afternoons reading books, growing in wisdom and emotional maturity, without any catastrophic misunderstandings or elaborate schemes. Darwin recalled periods of peaceful contemplation by the pond where he had been born, reflecting on the mystery of his transformation and finding gratitude for his impossible existence. Anais treasured memories of conversations with her parents where they had discussed complex philosophical questions without the discussions being interrupted by domestic disasters. These undocumented episodes suggested that the characters' lives were far richer and more complete than what external observation could reveal, that they continued to grow and develop during the spaces between visible adventures, and that their existence was not limited to the moments when they were actively serving the entertainment needs of unseen audiences. The community's response to these revelations about their supernatural nature was ultimately one of acceptance and even celebration, rather than being diminished by the knowledge that their reality operated according to cartoon logic. They found themselves appreciating the benevolent nature of the forces that had created and maintained their world. They understood that they had been granted the rare privilege of living in a reality where hope, friendship, and personal growth were not just possible but inevitable, where even the darkest moments contained the seeds of redemption and renewal. As the lost episode of supernatural awareness drew to its close, the residents of Elmore made a collective decision to embrace both their impossible nature and their genuine experiences, understanding that the apparent contradiction between fictional existence and real emotions was not a paradox to be solved, but rather a mystery to be celebrated. They had been given the extraordinary gift of lives that mattered not because they conformed to conventional reality, but because they expressed universal truths about love, friendship, growth, and the endless possibility for positive transformation that exists within every conscious being, regardless of the particular physical laws that govern their existence. The episode concluded with the community gathering in the town square, not for any special event or celebration, but simply to acknowledge their shared existence and their mutual commitment to continuing their impossible lives with the same enthusiasm, compassion, and hope that had always characterized their individual journeys through the beautiful absurdity of animated existence in the wonderful, impossible town of Elmore. In the quiet spaces between the chaos of daily life in the Watterson household, where the constant motion of animated existence occasionally pauses to allow for moments of profound contemplation, there exists a realm of philosophical inquiry that belongs entirely to Darwin, Raglan Caspian, Ahab Poseidon, Nicodemus Watterson III, that orange goldfish whose impossible existence serves as a living meditation on the nature of being, consciousness, and the mysterious forces that transform ordinary pets into extraordinary family members. The lost episodes that document Darwin's deepest thoughts reveal a mind grappling with questions that would challenge the greatest philosophers while maintaining the essential optimism and wonder that characterizes his approach to every aspect of his remarkable life. These are the stories that unfold in the spaces between spoken words, in the moments when Darwin stares out windows with the contemplative expression of someone trying to reconcile the reality of his existence with the logical impossibility of everything that has brought him to this moment of awareness. The lost episode known as The Philosopher Fish began on a quiet Sunday afternoon when Darwin found himself alone in the house, while the rest of his family pursued various activities that left him free to engage in the kind of extended contemplation that his naturally reflective nature craved but rarely had the opportunity to indulge without interruption from well-meaning but philosophically impatient family members. Sitting in the living room, his orange form perfectly still, in a way that recalled his former existence as an aquatic creature who could remain motionless for hours while observing the world beyond his bowl, Darwin began to contemplate the fundamental paradox of his existence, the simple yet overwhelming fact that he was a goldfish who walked, talked, breathed air, and somehow maintained both his essential fish nature and his adopted mammalian lifestyle, without experiencing any apparent biological conflict between these theoretically incompatible states of being. The question that had haunted Darwin since his earliest days as a terrestrial creature was not how his transformation had occurred, for he had long ago accepted that some mysteries were beyond rational explanation, and perhaps beyond the need for rational explanation, but rather what his impossible existence might mean in the larger context of consciousness, identity, and the nature of reality itself. He found himself wondering whether his love for his adoptive family was somehow different from the love that biological family members felt for each other, whether the bonds forged through choice and mutual acceptance carried the same weight and meaning as those established through genetic connection and shared history. The question was not born from doubt about the authenticity of his feelings, which he knew to be as real and profound as any emotion experienced by any conscious being, but rather from curiosity about the various forms that love could take and the different paths through which beings could become truly family to each other. Darwin's contemplation of his own existence led him naturally to broader questions about the nature of consciousness itself, particularly the mystery of how awareness could arise within beings whose physical forms seemed to preclude the possibility of complex thought. He wondered whether his capacity for philosophy and emotional depth had emerged simultaneously with his legs and lungs, or whether these aspects of his personality had always existed within him, waiting for the proper physical framework to allow their expression. The Lost episode documented Darwin's correspondence with marine biology professors at various universities, letters written in his careful handwriting that attempted to describe his condition without revealing too many details about his impossible biology. These letters, never officially sent but preserved in the archives of episodes that existed only in the character's private experiences, revealed Darwin's deep desire to understand his place in the broader context of evolutionary biology and scientific knowledge. His inquiries to these academic experts were carefully crafted to sound like theoretical questions rather than personal confessions, asking about the possibility of rapid evolutionary adaptation, the relationship between environment and biological development, and the mechanisms through which aquatic species might theoretically develop terrestrial capabilities under extraordinary circumstances. The responses he imagined receiving from these experts ranged from polite dismissal of impossible scenarios to detailed explanations of why such transformations violated every known principle of biological science. But Darwin's philosophical inquiries extended far beyond questions of biology into the realm of identity and continuity of self. He wondered whether he was still the same being who had once lived contentedly in a fishbowl, observing the Watterson family's activities with the detached interest of a pet, or whether his transformation had created an entirely new individual who simply carried the memories and essential personality traits of his former self. The question was more than academic curiosity, for it touched on fundamental issues of responsibility, relationship, and the meaning of personal growth. If he was indeed a different being than the goldfish who had once lived in the bowl, did that mean his love for Gumball was a new emotion, rather than the evolution of existing affection? If he was the same being, how could he reconcile his current complex emotional life with the simpler existence he had known as a pet? These contemplations led Darwin to consider the nature of transformation itself, not just his own extraordinary physical changes, but the more ordinary but equally mysterious ways in which all conscious beings grow and develop over time. He realized that every member of his family had undergone transformations that were perhaps less dramatic than his own, but equally profound in their implications for personal identity and the continuity of self. Gumball had transformed from a small child into a young adolescent, gaining knowledge, experience, and emotional complexity while somehow remaining essentially himself. Anais had grown from an infant into a remarkably intelligent child without losing the essential qualities that made her unique among her peers. Even Richard and Nicole, despite their apparent consistency, showed subtle signs of ongoing development and change in response to the challenges and opportunities of daily life. The Lost episode revealed Darwin's theory that consciousness itself was perhaps less a fixed state than a continuous process of becoming, a dynamic relationship between awareness and experience that allowed beings to remain essentially themselves while simultaneously growing and changing in response to new circumstances and challenges. This theory helped him understand his own transformation, not as a radical discontinuity, but as an extreme example of the natural process through which all conscious beings adapt and evolve throughout their lives. Darwin's philosophical investigations also extended to questions about the nature of reality, and his family's place within what they had gradually come to understand was an animated universe governed by laws that prioritized narrative coherence and comedic timing over conventional physics. He wondered whether their existence within this cartoon reality made their experiences and emotions somehow less authentic than those of beings who lived in more conventional realities. His conclusion, reached after extensive contemplation and careful observation of his family's emotional lives, was that the medium through which consciousness expressed itself was far less important than the genuine nature of the feelings, relationships, and growth that occurred within that medium. The love he felt for his family, the joy he experienced during their adventures, and the sadness he felt during their occasional conflicts were real, regardless of the particular physical laws that governed their expression. This realization led Darwin to a deeper appreciation of the gift he had been given through his impossible transformation. Rather than viewing his existence as a biological anomaly that required explanation or justification, he began to see it as evidence of the universe's capacity for benevolent intervention in the lives of conscious beings, proof that reality itself possessed a compassionate nature that prioritized the well-being and happiness of its inhabitants over strict adherence to conventional rules. The lost episode, known as the Darwin Diaries, documented his decision to keep a private journal where he could record his ongoing philosophical investigations and emotional observations without fear of overwhelming his family members with questions they were not equipped to answer or concerns they could not fully understand. These diary entries, written in the quiet hours when the house was still and his thoughts could flow without interruption, revealed the depth of his engagement with the fundamental questions of existence. His diary entries revealed his growing understanding that his role within the family was not simply that of a pet who had been elevated to family member status, but rather that of a bridge between different ways of being and different approaches to understanding the world. His unique perspective, shaped by his experience of existing in multiple states of being, allowed him to serve as a mediator between his family members when their different approaches to life created conflict or misunderstanding. Darwin's philosophical nature also led him to contemplate the ethical implications of his situation, particularly his responsibility to use his unusual insights and perspectives in service of his family's well-being and growth. He understood that his impossible existence came with obligations to help others find meaning and purpose in their own lives, regardless of whether their circumstances were as extraordinary as his own. The lost episodes documented Darwin's secret efforts to apply his philosophical insights to practical problems within his family and community. When Gumball struggled with questions of identity and self-worth, Darwin would engage him in conversations that were superficially about everyday topics, but actually designed to help his adopted brother explore deeper questions about the nature of personal value and the meaning of success. When Anais became overwhelmed by the burden of her exceptional intelligence, Darwin would share observations about the relationship between knowledge and wisdom, helping her understand that true intelligence included the ability to find joy and meaning in simple experiences, as well as complex intellectual challenges. His approach was never didactic or preachy, but rather took the form of gentle suggestions and thoughtful questions that encouraged others to discover their own answers to life's fundamental questions. The lost episode also revealed Darwin's ongoing correspondence with other pets throughout Elmore, a network of non-human consciousness that existed parallel to the more visible community of their owners and companions. Through this network, Darwin learned about the experiences of beings who existed in various states between their original animal nature and the anthropomorphized existence that characterized life in their animated world. These conversations with other pets revealed a spectrum of transformation and adaptation that helped Darwin understand his own experience as part of a larger pattern rather than an isolated anomaly. Some pets had achieved various degrees of humanization while maintaining their essential animal characteristics. Others had found ways to bridge their original nature with their role in human families, and a few, like Darwin himself, had undergone transformations so complete that they existed as fully integrated family members while somehow retaining their connection to their original species. The philosophical discussions that emerged from these interactions helped Darwin develop a more nuanced understanding of identity, consciousness, and the various ways that different forms of awareness could coexist within single individuals. He learned to appreciate the complexity of his own nature, rather than viewing it as a problem to be solved or a condition that required justification. As the lost episodes of Darwin's philosophical journey drew to their conclusion, his contemplations led him to a state of profound gratitude for the mysterious forces that had transformed him from a simple pet into a full family member capable of love, thought, and meaningful contribution to the lives of others. He understood that his impossible existence was not a burden to be endured or a mystery to be solved, but rather a gift to be treasured and shared with others who might benefit from his unique perspective on the nature of consciousness, family, and the endless possibilities for growth and transformation that existed within every moment of animated existence. The final lost episode in this series revealed Darwin's decision to embrace his role as the family's philosopher and emotional guide, using his unique insights to help others navigate the challenges and opportunities of their own impossible lives. He understood that his greatest contribution to his family was not simply his love and loyalty, important as those were, but his ability to help them find meaning and purpose within the beautiful absurdity of their existence in the wonderful, impossible world of Elmore. In the carefully ordered universe of intellectual achievement that exists within the developing mind of Anais Watterson, there dwells a profound loneliness that comes not from lack of companionship, but from the peculiar isolation that accompanies exceptional intelligence when it manifests in someone whose chronological age places her firmly within the realm of childhood, while her cognitive abilities soar far beyond the comprehension of most adults who encounter her in the course of daily life. The lost episodes that document Anais's struggle with the burden of extraordinary intelligence reveal a 4-year-old pink rabbit whose intellectual capacity creates a constant tension between her natural desire to engage with the world as a child and her irrepressible need to understand and analyze everything around her with the systematic thoroughness of a seasoned academic researcher whose life's work depends upon the accurate comprehension of complex systems and relationships. The lost episode, known as the Genius Hour, began on what appeared to be an ordinary Saturday morning when Anais, having completed her usual routine of reading 3 scientific journals, solving advanced mathematical equations for recreational purposes, and composing a brief essay on the sociological implications of cartoon physics in modern animated societies, found herself facing the peculiar problem that had begun to define much of her existence: the complete absence of intellectual peers with whom she could share her thoughts and discoveries. Her family, beloved as they were and essential to her emotional well-being, operated on cognitive wavelengths that rarely intersected with her own, except in moments of crisis when her analytical abilities became necessary for solving problems that her parents and brothers lacked the mental framework to approach systematically. These moments of intellectual usefulness provided her with a sense of purpose and belonging, but they also reinforced her awareness of the vast gulf between her mental capabilities and those of the people she loved most in the world. Anais had learned to navigate this cognitive isolation with remarkable grace for someone so young, developing strategies for translating her complex thoughts into language and concepts that her family could understand and appreciate without feeling intimidated or inadequate. She had become expert at disguising her profound insights as simple observations, at presenting her sophisticated analysis as childlike curiosity, and at finding ways to contribute to family discussions without overwhelming the conversation with information or perspectives that exceeded everyone else's capacity for comprehension. But the effort required to maintain this constant intellectual translation was exhausting in ways that she struggled to articulate even to herself, creating a peculiar form of emotional fatigue that came not from the exercise of her mental abilities, but from the necessity of perpetually constraining and disguising them in order to preserve the family harmony that provided the emotional foundation upon which all other aspects of her development depended. The lost episodes revealed Anais's secret correspondence with universities, research institutions, and individual scholars around the world, letters written in her careful handwriting that demonstrated a level of intellectual sophistication that would have been impressive in a graduate student, but was absolutely extraordinary, coming from someone who had not yet learned to tie her shoes with consistent success. These letters, never officially sent but preserved in the archives of episodes that existed only within the character's private experiences, revealed the depth of her hunger for intellectual engagement with minds capable of matching her own analytical abilities. Her inquiries to these academic institutions were carefully crafted to sound like precocious but age-appropriate questions from a gifted child, rather than the sophisticated research proposals they actually were. She would ask about theoretical physics concepts while pretending to be curious about how cartoon characters could survive explosions, inquire about advanced mathematical principles, while claiming to wonder about the geometry of her family's house, and explore complex philosophical questions, while maintaining the fiction that she was simply trying to understand why her brothers behaved in such consistently irrational ways. The responses she imagined receiving from these scholars ranged from patronizing explanations designed for children to serious academic engagement that recognized the genuine sophistication of her inquiries. In her most optimistic fantasies, she envisioned correspondence that evolved into meaningful intellectual relationships with researchers who could appreciate her unique perspective as someone who existed simultaneously within the world she was studying and outside the normal assumptions that governed most people's understanding of reality. But perhaps the most poignant aspect of Anais's intellectual isolation was her growing awareness that her exceptional intelligence, rather than being purely a gift, also carried with it responsibilities and burdens that she was still too young to fully understand or effectively manage. She could see patterns in her family's behavior that revealed their deepest insecurities and fears, could predict with uncomfortable accuracy the consequences of their various decisions and actions, and could understand the complex social and psychological forces that shaped their interactions with each other and with their community. This knowledge created moral dilemmas that would have challenged someone with far more life experience and emotional maturity. Should she warn her family about problems she could foresee, but they could not, even when her warnings might create anxiety or conflict that could be more damaging than the original problems? Should she use her analytical abilities to manipulate situations for what she believed to be everyone's benefit, even when such manipulation violated principles of honesty and respect for others' autonomy? Should she reveal the full extent of her capabilities when doing so might fundamentally alter the family dynamics that provided stability and love for everyone involved? The Lost episode documented Anais's decision to conduct a careful experiment in intellectual honesty, choosing a single day when she would interact with her family using her full cognitive abilities without any attempt to disguise or constrain her analytical insights. The results of this experiment provided her with valuable data about the consequences of complete intellectual authenticity, while also reinforcing her understanding of why she had developed her strategies for cognitive camouflage in the first place. The day began when Richard asked what appeared to be a simple question about why the television remote control had stopped working, a query that prompted Anais to provide a comprehensive analysis of electromagnetic interference patterns, battery chemistry, degradation rates, and the statistical probability of component failure based on usage patterns and environmental factors. Her explanation, while perfectly accurate and genuinely helpful, left her father staring at her with the bewildered expression of someone trying to process information that existed several levels beyond his conceptual framework. Gumball's request for help with his homework triggered an even more dramatic demonstration of the gap between Anais's capabilities and her family's expectations, when she not only solved his mathematics problems, but provided detailed explanations of the underlying theoretical principles, suggested more efficient problem-solving methodologies, and offered critiques of the textbook's approach to mathematical education that revealed flaws in the curriculum design that the authors themselves had probably never noticed. Darwin's casual comment about the weather evolved into an impromptu lecture on meteorological systems, climate patterns, and the complex interactions between atmospheric pressure, temperature gradients, and seasonal variation that determine local weather conditions. His polite attention to her explanation gradually shifted to the glazed expression of someone whose capacity for processing new information has been completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume and complexity of data being presented. Even Nicole, despite her own considerable intelligence and educational background, found herself struggling to keep pace with Anais's analytical output when a simple conversation about family finances became an extensive discussion of economic theory. investment strategies, and the mathematical principles that govern compound interest and risk assessment. The conversation concluded with Anais providing a detailed budget optimization plan that would have impressed professional financial advisors, but left her mother feeling intellectually inadequate and slightly resentful of being shown superior knowledge by someone who still required assistance, reaching items on high shelves. The experiment's most revealing moment occurred during dinner, when Anais, responding to what she perceived as an invitation to share her thoughts freely, began analyzing the psychological dynamics of their family interactions with the clinical detachment of a professional therapist conducting a case study. Her observations about behavioral patterns, emotional needs, and communication strategies were accurate and potentially helpful, but they also violated the unspoken boundaries that allowed family members to maintain their privacy and dignity within their shared domestic space. The silence that followed her analysis was not hostile, but rather profoundly uncomfortable, as if she had accidentally revealed knowledge that she was not supposed to possess, or had demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally altered everyone's understanding of who she was in relation to the rest of the family. The moment taught her that intellectual honesty, while valuable in many contexts, could also be a form of emotional violence when applied without consideration for others' capacity to receive and process challenging information. The lost episodes also documented Anais's correspondence courses with various educational institutions, secret academic programs that she pursued during her spare time to satisfy her hunger for intellectual challenge and growth. These courses, ranging from advanced mathematics and theoretical physics to philosophy and comparative literature, provided her with the mental stimulation she craved, while also creating additional stress as she struggled to balance her secret academic pursuits with her family responsibilities and her need to maintain the appearance of being a normal, 4-year-old child. Her academic achievements in these correspondence courses were remarkable by any standard, demonstrating mastery of concepts and methodologies that typically required years of specialized study to understand properly. She completed assignments that challenged graduate students, participated in online discussions with scholars from around the world, and contributed original insights to ongoing research projects in multiple fields simultaneously. But these achievements also highlighted the fundamental disconnect between her intellectual capabilities and her emotional and social development, creating a form of psychological fragmentation that she struggled to manage without external support or guidance. She was simultaneously a child who needed comfort and reassurance when faced with emotional challenges, and a scholar capable of contributing to humanity's understanding of complex theoretical problems, and the tension between these aspects of her identity created stress that she was still learning to recognize and address effectively. The lost episode known as The Weight of Knowing explored Anais's growing awareness that her exceptional intelligence carried with it not only opportunities for personal fulfillment, but also obligations to use her abilities in service of others' well-being and society's improvement. She began to understand that her cognitive gifts were not simply personal advantages to be enjoyed privately, but rather resources that came with moral responsibilities for their application and development. This realization led her to contemplate questions about the nature of talent, responsibility, and the relationship between individual achievement and social contribution that would have challenged professional ethicists and moral philosophers. She wondered whether her intelligence gave her greater responsibility for solving problems and helping others than someone with more typical cognitive abilities would bear, and whether her failure to maximize her intellectual potential would constitute a form of moral failure that harmed not only herself, but also everyone who might have benefited from her contributions. The burden of these ethical considerations was made heavier by her awareness that she was still developing the emotional and social skills necessary to navigate complex moral decisions responsibly. She possessed the analytical tools to identify ethical problems and evaluate potential solutions, but she lacked the life experience and emotional maturity that would allow her to implement her insights without causing unintended harm or creating new problems that might be worse than the original issues she was trying to address. The lost episodes concluded with Anais's gradual development of a more balanced approach to her intellectual gifts. one that allowed her to pursue academic challenges and contribute her analytical insights to family problem solving, while also preserving the emotional relationships and simple pleasures that made her childhood meaningful despite its unique complications. She learned to find joy in intellectual achievement, while also appreciating the love and companionship that her family provided, understanding that both types of fulfillment were necessary for her complete development as both a scholar and a person. Her final realization, documented in the last of these lost episodes, was that her exceptional intelligence was most valuable not when it set her apart from others, but when it allowed her to understand and connect with them more deeply, using her analytical abilities not to demonstrate her superiority, but to help everyone around her achieve their own potential for growth and happiness within the wonderful, impossible world they shared together in Elmore. In the deepest chambers of Richard Watterson's subconscious mind, where dreams and possibilities exist in a state of perpetual potential that has never been constrained by the practical limitations that govern waking life, there dwells a collection of abandoned ambitions and forgotten talents that tell the story of a pink rabbit whose true capabilities have been obscured by decades of voluntary retreat into the comforting embrace of purposeful underachievement and deliberate disconnection from the demanding expectations of a world that measures success through productivity rather than contentment. The lost episodes that document Richard's hidden depths reveal a man whose apparent laziness and chronic confusion mask a complex inner life filled with profound insights, remarkable abilities, and a philosophical approach to existence that prioritizes emotional authenticity and family harmony over conventional markers of achievement or social recognition. These are the stories that unfold in the liminal space between sleeping and waking, where Richard's true self emerges from beneath the protective layers of cultivated incompetence that shield him from a world that has never quite known what to do with someone whose gifts manifest in ways that defy easy categorization or practical application. The lost episode known as The Dreamer began on what appeared to be an ordinary afternoon when Richard settled into his favorite armchair for what his family had come to recognize as his daily nap, that period of apparent inactivity that served as both rest and retreat from the overwhelming complexity of conscious existence in a world where even simple tasks somehow became elaborate adventures in creative problem-solving and unintended consequence management. But on this particular afternoon, as Richard's consciousness drifted into the realm of sleep, something extraordinary occurred that would have amazed anyone who had been present to witness it, though the very nature of the phenomenon ensured that it could only unfold in perfect solitude, away from the well-meaning but inevitably disruptive presence of family members who loved him deeply but had never learned to appreciate the subtle magnificence of his unconscious mind. As sleep claimed him, Richard's entire demeanor underwent a transformation that was both gradual and complete, his usually slack features organizing themselves into expressions of focused concentration and profound understanding, while his hands, which during waking hours seemed to exist in a state of perpetual uncertainty about their proper function, began moving with the precise confidence of someone engaged in complex creative work that required both technical skill and artistic vision. In his dreams, Richard was not the chronically confused and perpetually helpless figure that his family had learned to love and protect, but rather a master of disciplines and abilities that his waking self had somehow forgotten or deliberately suppressed. He composed symphonies that would have moved professional musicians to tears, solved mathematical equations that had puzzled academic researchers for decades, and created works of art that captured the essential beauty and absurdity of animated existence with a depth of understanding that suggested profound philosophical engagement with the nature of reality itself. The lost episodes revealed that Richard's apparent inability to function effectively during waking hours was not evidence of genuine incompetence, but rather the result of a complex psychological mechanism that protected his extraordinary but fragile talents from the harsh demands of a world that would have required him to transform his gifts into marketable skills, to schedule his creativity according to external deadlines, and to justify his existence through measurable contributions to society's conventional understanding of productivity and success. His childhood, documented in fragments of memory that surfaced during these dream episodes, had been marked by brief periods of exceptional achievement that inevitably led to increased expectations from adults who saw his potential but failed to understand the delicate conditions necessary for its expression. Each attempt to harness and direct his abilities had resulted in their temporary disappearance, as if his gifts could only flourish in an atmosphere of complete freedom from external pressure or structured expectation. The lost episode, known as The Man He Could Have Been, explored an alternative timeline that existed only in Richard's subconscious awareness, a parallel reality where his talents had been nurtured and developed according to their own natural rhythms rather than being forced into premature practical application. In this imagined existence, Richard had become a renowned composer, whose music helped people understand the emotional complexity of seemingly simple experiences, a mathematician whose equations revealed hidden patterns in the chaos of daily life, and an artist whose paintings captured the joy and wonder that existed within even the most mundane moments of animated existence. But this parallel Richard, for all his professional success and public recognition, lacked something essential that the actual Richard possessed in abundance: the deep contentment that came from prioritizing love and family relationships over personal achievement, and the wisdom to understand that a life dedicated to the happiness of others was ultimately more meaningful than one focused on individual accomplishment, regardless of how impressive such accomplishments might appear to external observers. The lost episodes also documented Richard's secret nocturnal activities, those mysterious hours between midnight and dawn, when his sleeping mind somehow managed to complete complex tasks that his waking consciousness would have found completely bewildering. His family would occasionally wake to discover that household repairs had been completed with professional expertise, that complicated paperwork had been filled out with meticulous accuracy, or that creative problems they had discussed the previous evening had been solved through elegant solutions that none of them could remember devising. These nocturnal achievements were never dramatic enough to attract significant attention, but they occurred with sufficient frequency to suggest that Richard's unconscious mind possessed capabilities that were completely inaccessible to his waking self. He would repair appliances using principles of engineering that he had never formally studied, balance the family budget using mathematical techniques that he could not have explained if asked, and even compose lullabies that helped his children sleep through particularly difficult nights, though he retained no memory of these creative acts when morning arrived. The lost episode revealed Richard's correspondence course in professional dreaming, a secret academic pursuit that he had undertaken during the early years of his marriage, when he was still struggling to find a career path that would accommodate his unique talents and unconventional relationship with productivity. This correspondence course, offered by an institution that specialized in alternative approaches to professional development, had taught him to recognize and cultivate the extraordinary capabilities that emerged during his dream states. His coursework had included assignments in lucid dreaming, creative problem solving during sleep, and the development of techniques for retaining dream-based insights after waking. He had excelled in these studies with the same natural ability that characterized all his unconscious achievements, demonstrating a level of mastery that impressed even instructors who were accustomed to working with students whose relationship with sleep and dreams exceeded normal boundaries. But the correspondence course had also taught Richard that his gifts came with inherent limitations that made them unsuitable for conventional career applications. His abilities could only manifest under specific conditions of complete relaxation and freedom from external pressure, and any attempt to schedule or direct them inevitably resulted in their temporary disappearance. He learned that his talents were meant to serve his family and community in quiet, unofficial ways, rather than being transformed into professional credentials or sources of income. The lost episodes documented the job interview that would have changed everything, a meeting with representatives from a company that specialized in creative, problem-solving, and innovative approaches to business challenges. The interview had been arranged through his correspondence course instructors, who believed that Richard's unique abilities could be valuable in the right professional context. with proper understanding and accommodation of his unusual working methods. The interview itself had gone remarkably well, with Richard demonstrating abilities that amazed the interviewers and led to immediate offers of employment at salary levels that would have transformed his family's financial situation permanently. The company representatives were fascinated by his approach to complex problems, his ability to identify solutions that had escaped teams of conventional thinkers, and his natural talent for finding creative approaches to challenges that had seemed insurmountable through traditional methods. But as Richard walked home from the interview, considering the implications of accepting a position that would require him to perform his talents on demand, according to corporate schedules and business deadlines, he experienced a moment of profound clarity about what such employment would mean for his essential nature and his relationships with the people he loved most in the world. He realized that his gifts were not separate from his personality, but rather integral expressions of who he was as a complete being, and that any attempt to extract and commercialize them would inevitably alter his fundamental character in ways that would ultimately harm both his family relationships and his own psychological well-being. His talents flourished precisely because they existed in service of love rather than obligation, because they emerged from genuine care for others rather than professional responsibility. The lost episodes revealed Richard's decision to decline the job offer, a choice that his family never learned about but that shaped the trajectory of their lives in ways they could never have imagined. His rejection of conventional career success was not evidence of laziness or lack of ambition, but rather a profound act of self-knowledge and commitment to values that prioritized emotional authenticity over external achievement. His relationship with his own father's expectations provided additional context for understanding Richard's complex relationship with success and achievement. The elder Watterson had been a man whose life was defined by conventional markers of accomplishment, whose identity was built around professional achievement and social recognition, and who had never understood how his son could be content with a life that appeared to lack direction or meaningful purpose. The generational conflict between Richard and his father was not characterized by dramatic confrontations or explicit disapproval, but rather by a quiet sadness that permeated their interactions, a mutual recognition that they operated according to completely different value systems that made genuine understanding nearly impossible despite their underlying love for each other. Richard's father had spent years trying to motivate his son to pursue conventional success, offering connections, opportunities, and advice that were generously intended but fundamentally misguided, because they failed to recognize that Richard's apparent underachievement was actually a sophisticated strategy for protecting gifts that could not survive in conventional, professional environments. The lost episodes concluded with Richard's growing understanding that his role within his family was not that of provider or protector in traditional senses, but rather that of emotional anchor and source of unconditional love, someone whose presence created the psychological safety that allowed other family members to pursue their own adventures and growth with confidence that home would always be a place of acceptance and comfort, regardless of what challenges they encountered in the wider world. His apparent helplessness and chronic confusion served important functions within the family dynamics, creating opportunities for others to feel needed and capable, while also ensuring that their home remained a refuge from the demanding expectations of external society. His inability to function effectively in conventional terms became a gift to his family, providing them with countless opportunities to experience the satisfaction that comes from helping someone they love, while also ensuring that their domestic life remained focused on relationships and emotional connection rather than achievement and competition. The final lost episode revealed Richard's secret knowledge that his approach to life, while unconventional and occasionally frustrating for those who cared about him, was ultimately a form of wisdom that prioritized the most important aspects of human existence: love, family, contentment, and the ability to find joy in simple pleasures over the external markers of success that often leave people feeling empty and disconnected despite their impressive accomplishments. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed him each night, Richard would reflect on the life he had chosen, understanding that his decision to embrace apparent failure rather than pursue conventional success had given his family something precious and rare, a home where love was more important than achievement, where acceptance was unconditional, and where the simple pleasure of being together was recognized as the most valuable treasure that any conscious being could ever hope to possess. In the carefully constructed fortress of composure that Nicole Watterson had built around her deepest emotions, there existed fault lines of stress and exhaustion that ran so deep they threatened the very foundations of her identity as mother, wife, and functioning member of society, creating fractures in her psychological architecture that she had spent years learning to navigate without allowing anyone else to glimpse the enormous effort required to maintain the appearance of having everything under control when the reality was far more complex and precarious than even her closest family members could have imagined. The lost episodes that document Nicole's breaking point and subsequent recovery reveal a blue cat whose legendary capacity for managing chaos and solving impossible problems had been purchased at the cost of her own emotional well-being, creating a psychological debt that accumulated interest with each crisis resolved, each disaster prevented, and each moment when she chose her family's immediate needs over her own long-term sustainability as a person capable of maintaining the extraordinary standards she had set for herself as the primary stabilizing force in the Watterson household. The lost episode, known as The Calm Before, began on what appeared to be an ordinary Tuesday morning when Nicole woke with the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down upon her consciousness like a physical force, the mental catalogue of tasks, concerns, and potential problems that required her attention stretching ahead of her like an endless corridor filled with obligations that could never be fully completed, because each resolution inevitably created new complications that demanded equally careful management and consideration. Her morning routine, perfected through years of practice into a sequence of activities that maximized efficiency while minimizing the risk of domestic catastrophe, proceeded with the mechanical precision of someone who had learned to function on autopilot when conscious thought became too overwhelming to sustain without risking the kind of emotional breakdown that would leave her family without the anchor they had come to depend upon for their basic survival. In a world that seemed designed to test the limits of parental patience and problem-solving capability. But on this particular morning, as Nicole moved through her usual preparations for another day of crisis management and damage control, something fundamental began to shift in the delicate balance of psychological forces that had allowed her to maintain her role as the family's primary source of stability and competence. The shift was subtle at first, barely noticeable beneath the surface of her usual efficient morning activities, but it carried within it the potential for changes that would alter not only her own existence, but the entire dynamic structure that held the Watterson household together. The first sign that something was different occurred when Nicole found herself pausing in the middle of preparing breakfast, her hands frozen over the stove as she stared at the familiar chaos of her kitchen, with the expression of someone seeing a familiar landscape for the first time, and wondering how she had arrived at this particular place, and whether she possessed the strength or desire to continue occupying it indefinitely. The moment of paralysis lasted only seconds, but it was followed by a wave of exhaustion so profound that she had to grip the counter for support, her body's accumulated fatigue finally breaking through the barriers of determination and caffeine that had sustained her through months of operating at levels of stress and activity that would have overwhelmed individuals with less developed coping mechanisms or weaker commitments to family well-being. The lost episodes revealed that Nicole had been experiencing these moments of overwhelming fatigue with increasing frequency, brief glimpses of the psychological toll that her lifestyle had been exacting from her mental and physical resources, warning signs that she had learned to ignore or rationalize as temporary inconveniences that would resolve themselves once the current crisis passed and life returned to whatever approximated normal conditions in the Watterson household. But the crises never passed completely, and normal conditions never lasted long enough to allow for genuine recovery, creating a cycle of depletion and emergency response that had gradually eroded her reserves of emotional resilience while simultaneously reinforcing her family's dependence on her ability to solve problems and manage situations that exceeded their individual capabilities for effective response. The Lost episode documented Nicole's secret therapy sessions, clandestine appointments with a professional counselor that she scheduled during her lunch breaks from work, using personal time that should have been devoted to rest and recuperation, to address psychological needs that she could not acknowledge openly, without risking her family's confidence in her ability to continue serving as their primary source of stability and support. These therapy sessions, conducted in a small office, decorated with the kind of soothing colors and generic motivational artwork that characterize professional helping environments, provided Nicole with the first opportunity she had experienced in years to articulate the complex emotions and overwhelming responsibilities that defined her daily existence, without fear of burdening others with problems they were not equipped to solve or concerns that might undermine their trust in her competence. Her therapist, a patient woman whose training had prepared her to recognize the particular challenges faced by individuals who served as the primary functional adults in households where other family members operated according to different standards of personal responsibility and practical competence, helped Nicole understand that her exhaustion was not evidence of personal weakness, but rather the natural consequence of maintaining unsustainable levels of activity and emotional investment over extended periods. The therapy sessions revealed the extent to which Nicole had internalized the belief that her worth as a person was directly connected to her ability to solve other people's problems and prevent domestic disasters, creating a psychological framework that made it impossible for her to acknowledge her own needs without experiencing guilt and anxiety about potentially failing in her primary role as the family's guardian against chaos and catastrophe. Through careful questioning and gentle challenge of her assumptions about responsibility and self-care, the therapist helped Nicole recognize that her pattern of sacrificing her own well-being for her family's immediate comfort was ultimately counterproductive, creating conditions that would inevitably lead to complete breakdown if not addressed through systematic changes in her approach to managing both household responsibilities and her own emotional needs. The Lost episode, known as The Storm Within, documented the evening when Nicole's carefully maintained composure finally cracked under the accumulated pressure of years of suppressed exhaustion and unacknowledged emotional needs, creating a domestic crisis that was unlike any her family had previously encountered because it originated not from external chaos or accidental catastrophe, but from the fundamental breakdown of the psychological systems that had made their unusual lifestyle sustainable. The breakdown began with a simple request from Richard for help finding his favorite shirt, an ordinary domestic interaction that would normally have been resolved through Nicole's efficient application of superior organizational skills and intimate knowledge of household inventory systems. But on this evening, the request triggered something far more complex than simple assistance with a minor problem, unleashing a flood of emotions and concerns that had been accumulating behind the barriers of her determined competence. Instead of simply locating the requested garment, Nicole found herself explaining in exhaustive detail the extensive mental processes required to maintain awareness of every family member's possessions, preferences, schedules, and needs, the invisible labor of organization and anticipation that made their domestic life possible, but that required constant vigilance and continuous sacrifice of her own time, energy, and personal interests. Her explanation gradually transformed into a comprehensive catalogue of all the tasks, responsibilities, and emotional burdens that she carried without acknowledgement or assistance, the accumulated weight of years of crisis management and damage control that had somehow become so normalized within their family dynamic that no one, including herself, had recognized the unsustainable nature of the system they had created. The family's response to this unprecedented display of vulnerability and frustration revealed the depth of their dependence on Nicole's emotional stability and their complete lack of preparation for encountering her in a state of anything other than competent problem-solving mode. They stared at her with expressions of confusion and concern that demonstrated their genuine love for her. while also highlighting their inability to comprehend the psychological complexity of the role she had been filling in their raid lives. The lost episodes documented Nicole's decision to take a brief sabbatical from her usual family responsibilities, a carefully planned period of reduced engagement that would allow her to recover some measure of emotional equilibrium, while also providing her family with an opportunity to develop their own problem-solving capabilities and reduce their dependence on her constant intervention and management. The announcement of this sabbatical created panic and confusion among family members who had never been required to function without her guidance and support, but it also revealed reserves of competence and cooperation that had remained hidden beneath their comfortable reliance on her superior organizational abilities and willingness to handle difficult situations on their behalf. Richard, confronted with the necessity of managing household tasks without Nicole's oversight and assistance, discovered that his apparent incompetence was partially voluntary, a learned helplessness that had developed in response to living with someone whose standards and efficiency made his own efforts seem inadequate by comparison. When necessity required it, he proved capable of basic domestic competence, though his methods were unconventional, and his results were far from perfect. Gumball and Darwin found themselves forced to develop communication and problem-solving skills that had remained dormant while Nicole was available to mediate their conflicts and resolve their various crises through direct intervention. Their increased cooperation and mutual support demonstrated that their capacity for responsible behavior had been suppressed by the availability of parental solutions rather than being entirely absent from their character development. Even Anais, despite her young age, proved capable of contributing to household management through her superior analytical abilities and organizational instincts, taking on responsibilities that allowed other family members to focus on tasks that better matched their individual capabilities and preferences. The lost episode revealed Nicole's correspondence course in anger management, a secret educational pursuit that she had undertaken in recognition of her growing difficulty, maintaining emotional equilibrium in the face of constant low-level frustrations and occasional major crises that tested her patience and problem-solving abilities beyond their sustainable limits. The course materials, designed for individuals whose anger responses had become problematic in their personal or professional relationships, helped Nicole understand that her emotional reactions were not character flaws, but rather natural responses to unreasonable levels of stress and responsibility that would have challenged anyone's capacity for maintaining composure, rational decision-making. Through the course exercises and self-reflection assignments, Nicole learned to recognize the early warning signs of emotional overload and to implement strategies for managing her stress responses before they escalated into the kind of explosive anger that had become her trademark reaction to situations that exceeded her patience or problem-solving capabilities. The anger management course also helped her understand that her family's fear of her emotional outbursts, while understandable given the intensity of her reactions, had created an unhealthy dynamic where important conversations about household responsibilities and behavioral expectations were avoided rather than addressed through honest communication and mutual problem-solving. The lost episode documented Nicole's temporary transformation into a perfect 1950s housewife, a psychological experiment in alternative approaches to domestic management that emerged from her therapy sessions and represented her attempt to understand whether different models of family organization might provide more sustainable approaches to her role as wife and mother. During this phase, which lasted approximately 2 weeks, Nicole adopted the mannerisms, priorities, and behavioral patterns that characterized idealized representations of domestic femininity from earlier eras, focusing her energies on creating perfect meals, maintaining immaculate household conditions, and providing unwavering emotional support for her family members, while suppressing her own needs and opinions in favor of harmonious family relationships. The experiment was initially welcomed by her family members, who appreciated the reduction in household tension and the increased attention to their comfort and preferences. but it gradually created new forms of psychological strain as Nicole struggled to maintain standards of domestic perfection that required even more intensive labor and self-sacrifice than her usual approaches to household management. The artificial nature of this transformation also created emotional distance between Nicole and her family members, who found themselves missing the authentic person who had been replaced by this idealized but ultimately unsatisfying version of domestic competence that prioritized surface harmony over genuine emotional connection and mutual understanding. The lost episodes concluded with Nicole's gradual development of a more balanced approach to her role within the family, one that acknowledged both her exceptional capabilities and her human limitations, creating space for other family members to contribute to household stability while also establishing boundaries that protected her own emotional well-being and personal development. Her final realization, documented in the last of these lost episodes, was that her family's love for her was not conditional upon her ability to solve all their problems or manage every aspect of their domestic life, but rather was based on their appreciation for her as a complete person whose own needs and happiness were just as important as the needs she worked so hard to meet for everyone else. The recovery process involved learning to delegate responsibilities, to ask for help when needed, and to recognize that temporary chaos and imperfection were acceptable prices to pay for sustainable family relationships and personal well-being that could endure over the long term rather than burning brightly for a few years before collapsing under the weight of unreasonable expectations and accumulated exhaustion. In the quiet moments that followed her emotional recovery, Nicole found herself able to enjoy her family's company in ways that had been impossible during her years of constant crisis management, discovering that love and appreciation could flourish more naturally when not overshadowed by the pressure to maintain impossible standards of competence and self-sacrifice that had nearly destroyed the very relationships they were meant to protect and nurture. In the carefully constructed social ecosystem that surrounds the Watterson family like rings of interconnected relationships and shared experiences, there exists a constellation of supporting characters whose individual stories and private struggles create the rich tapestry of community life that makes Elmore more than simply a backdrop for the adventures of its most chaotic residents, but rather a living, breathing environment where every inhabitant carries their own burdens, pursues their own dreams, and grapples with existential questions that are no less profound for being experienced by beings whose very existence challenges conventional understanding of what constitutes normal reality. The lost episodes that document the extended universe of friends and enemies reveal a network of relationships and dependencies that extends far beyond the obvious connections between classmates and neighbors, creating a web of influence and mutual support that shapes every character's development in ways both subtle and dramatic, while also providing glimpses into the private lives of individuals who might appear to be simple comic relief, but who actually possess depths of personality and complexity of motivation that rival those of any protagonist in their relief bet, richness, and authenticity. The lost episode known as The Others began with Tobias Wilson standing in front of his bedroom mirror, staring at his rainbow-colored form with the expression of someone trying to understand the fundamental nature of his own existence, while simultaneously grappling with questions of identity and purpose that had been troubling him with increasing intensity as he moved through the early stages of adolescence and began to recognize the ways in which his unusual biology set him apart from his peers, in ways that extended far beyond mere physical appearance. Tobias's rainbow coloration, which most observers assumed to be a simple aesthetic characteristic like any other physical trait, actually represented something far more complex and psychologically significant, a visual manifestation of his internal emotional states that shifted and changed in response to his feelings and experiences in ways that made it impossible for him to hide his true reactions to the world around him, creating a form of enforced emotional transparency that was both blessing and burden in his attempts to navigate the social complexities of teenage existence. The lost episodes revealed that Tobias's colors had not always been random or chaotic, but had once followed patterns that reflected his emotional development and psychological growth. in ways that he was only beginning to understand as he learned to read the subtle language of his own chromatic responses to different situations and relationships. His growing awareness of these patterns had led him to realize that his appearance was not simply decorative but functional, serving as a form of emotional communication that operated below the level of conscious awareness, but that influenced how others responded to him in ways they themselves might not fully comprehend. This realization had created both opportunities and challenges for Tobias, as he struggled to understand his place within the social hierarchy of Elmore Junior High School and to develop relationships that went beyond surface-level interactions based on his unusual appearance or his reputation, for saying things that were simultaneously profound and completely bewildering to those around him. The Lost episodes documented Tobias's secret correspondence with researchers who studied the intersection between psychology and chromatic biology, scientists whose work focused on understanding how emotional states could manifest as physical characteristics in beings whose biology operated according to principles that differed from conventional mammalian or reptilian patterns. These researchers, working at institutions that specialized in the study of impossible anatomies and their psychological implications, had provided Tobias with frameworks for understanding his own experience that helped him recognize his condition as a unique form of embodied emotional intelligence, rather than simply an arbitrary quirk of animated existence. His correspondence with these experts had also revealed that his ability to display his emotions through color changes was not just a personal characteristic, but potentially a form of communication that could serve important social functions within communities that learned to read and interpret such signals accurately. This knowledge had given Tobias a sense of purpose and value that extended beyond his occasional role as comic relief in other people's adventures, helping him understand that his unusual nature might actually be a gift that could benefit others, if he learned to use it consciously rather than simply experiencing it as something that happened to him. Meanwhile, in the Gothic mansion that served as the earthly residence for the Ying family, Carrie's experience of existence as a ghost had led her into complex philosophical territory regarding the nature of consciousness, identity, and the bureaucratic systems that apparently governed the afterlife, with the same combination of arbitrary rules and administrative inefficiency that characterized most institutional arrangements in the world of the living. The Lost episodes revealed that Carrie's ghostly existence was not the simple matter of being deceased while somehow continuing to attend school and maintain friendships that it appeared to be from external observation, but rather involved navigation of complex interdimensional bureaucracies that regulated the interaction between the living and the dead, according to principles that seemed to prioritize paperwork and procedural compliance over common sense or compassionate consideration of individual circumstances. Her daily existence required constant communication with afterlife administrators whose understanding of contemporary teenage social dynamics was limited by their own experience of mortality in eras when educational systems, family structures, and peer relationships operated according to completely different principles and expectations. These bureaucratic interactions, conducted through methods that combine traditional seance techniques with more modern forms of interdimensional telecommunication, consumed significant portions of Carrie's time and energy, while rarely producing results that actually addressed her practical needs or supported her efforts to maintain meaningful relationships with her still-living friends. The afterlife bureaucracy had initially been confused by Carrie's desire to continue attending school and participating in normal teenage activities, assuming that her priorities would naturally shift toward more traditionally ghostly pursuits, such as haunting specific locations, delivering messages from other deceased individuals, or providing supernatural assistance to living people who were dealing with their own mortality-related concerns. The administrator's inability to understand her commitment to maintaining her friendships and educational pursuits had created ongoing conflicts that required diplomatic negotiation and creative interpretation of regulations that had apparently been written without consideration for cases like hers. In the Banana family compound, where the logistics of maintaining a household composed entirely of sentient fruit created unique challenges that ranged from climate control to nutritional supplementation. Joe's natural enthusiasm and boundless energy masked deeper concerns about the sustainability of his family's lifestyle and their place within the broader community of Elmore, where their fruit-based biology created both advantages and vulnerabilities that required careful management and strategic planning. The Lost episodes documented the banana family's extensive network of connections to agricultural research institutions, nutritional science laboratories, and botanical conservation organizations that provided both practical support for their unusual biological needs and intellectual framework for understanding their role within the broader ecosystem of animated existence. These relationships had revealed that the banana family was not simply an isolated example of impossible biology, but rather part of a larger community of fruit-based consciousness that existed throughout the world, maintaining their own cultural traditions and support networks, while also participating in the broader society of mixed-species communities like Elmore. Joe's father, who served as the unofficial leader of this extended fruit community, had been working for years to establish formal recognition of fruit rights within legal systems that had been designed primarily to address the concerns of animal-based consciousness, and had never adequately considered the unique needs and capabilities of plant-based sentient beings. This political activism, conducted through careful lobbying efforts and educational campaigns designed to increase awareness of fruit consciousness issues, had created both opportunities and risks for families like Joe's, who were trying to balance their desire for social acceptance with their need to maintain the specific environmental and nutritional conditions that their biology required for long-term survival. The banana family's involvement in what could only be described as fruit mafia activities was actually a sophisticated network of mutual support and resource sharing that had developed organically among fruit-based families who found themselves dealing with similar challenges related to seasonal availability of essential nutrients, protection from agricultural diseases that could affect their entire community, and coordination of political efforts to secure recognition and protection of their rights within legal systems that often struggle to classify their status properly. Hot Dog Guy's existential crisis about being food had reached levels of philosophical complexity that would have impressed professional ethicists and moral philosophers as he grappled with questions about the nature of consciousness, the ethics of consumption, and the psychological implications of existing as a sentient being whose physical form was identical to objects that other conscious beings regularly consumed for sustenance without any apparent awareness of the potential moral complications involved in such practices. His daily existence required constant navigation of social situations where other characters would make casual references to eating hot dogs, discuss their preferences for various condiments and preparation methods, or even consume actual hot dogs in his presence while apparently remaining completely unaware of the psychological impact such actions might have on someone whose personal identity was intimately connected to the food item in question. The cognitive dissonance created by these interactions had led Hot Dog Guy to develop sophisticated philosophical frameworks for understanding the relationship between form and identity, the nature of consciousness independent of physical manifestation, and the ethical implications of existence in a world where the boundary between person and object was not always clearly defined. The Lost episodes revealed Hot Dog Guy's correspondence with philosophers who specialized in questions of identity and consciousness, scholars whose work explored the boundaries between person and thing, subject and object, in ways that provided intellectual support for his efforts to maintain psychological stability while existing in a form that created constant reminders of his own potential vulnerability to being misunderstood or misclassified by others, who might not recognize his sentient nature. His philosophical investigations had also led him to connect with other food-based conscious beings throughout the world, creating a support network of individuals who shared similar challenges related to maintaining personal dignity and psychological well-being while existing in forms that carried cultural associations with consumption rather than conversation. These relationships had provided Hot Dog Guy with both practical strategies for managing difficult social situations and emotional support from others who understood the unique stresses and complications that characterized his particular form of existence. Masami's family background in weather manipulation and atmospheric control had connected her to a vast network of cloud-based consciousness that operated according to principles of environmental stewardship and climate management that extended far beyond the local weather patterns that affected daily life in Elmore, creating responsibilities and obligations that sometimes conflicted with her desire to simply enjoy normal teenage experiences without constantly worrying about her family's role in maintaining atmospheric stability across much larger geographic regions. The Cloud family's involvement in what could be characterized as weather manipulation conspiracy was actually a sophisticated system of environmental management that had evolved over centuries of cooperation between cloud-based consciousness and other atmospheric phenomena, creating a form of natural climate control that operated independently of human weather modification efforts, while also occasionally intersecting with them in ways that required careful coordination and diplomatic communication. Masami's individual role within this larger system was still developing as she learned to control her own atmospheric abilities and understand her responsibilities. As a member of a community whose actions had far-reaching consequences for agricultural cycles, seasonal patterns, and the overall stability of regional climate systems, the pressure of these developing responsibilities, combined with her natural desire to fit in with her peers and enjoy typical adolescent experiences, had created internal conflicts that she was still learning to navigate with the support of her family and the broader Cloud community. The Eggheads, despite their apparent simplicity and focus on mathematical precision, were actually involved in scientific research projects that operated at the intersection of theoretical physics and practical engineering, contributing to humanity's understanding of how animated physics operated and whether the principles that governed their reality could be applied to solve problems in more conventional physical environments. Their secret experiments, conducted in laboratory spaces that were hidden within their apparently simple domestic arrangements, involved testing the boundaries of cartoon physics, measuring the relationship between emotional states and physical laws, and documenting the ways in which consciousness could influence material reality through mechanisms that remained poorly understood by conventional scientific methodology. The Lost episodes concluded with Leslie's Botanical Network, a system of plant-based communication that connected every garden, park, and wild space throughout Elmore and beyond, creating a form of environmental monitoring and information sharing that operated entirely below the level of human awareness, while providing essential services related to air quality management, soil health maintenance, and the coordination of growth patterns that supported the broader ecosystem within which all the town's inhabitants existed, whether they were aware of their dependence on these systems or not. In the liminal spaces where the fourth wall becomes permeable, and the characters of Elmore begin to perceive the larger context within which their animated existence unfolds, there exists a collection of lost episodes so extraordinary in their implications, and so potentially destabilizing to the comfortable illusions that allow everyday life to proceed without existential paralysis, that they have been relegated to the deepest archives of impossible narratives, stories that acknowledge the constructed nature of reality, while simultaneously celebrating the genuine emotions and meaningful relationships that flourish within that constructed framework. The Lost episodes that document these meta-adventures and reality breaks reveal a community that has achieved something remarkable and slightly terrifying in its implications: the ability to remain emotionally authentic and psychologically stable, while acknowledging that their entire existence operates according to narrative principles rather than natural laws, that their personalities and relationships exist primarily to serve entertainment functions for audiences they can occasionally perceive but never directly address, and that the very concept of free will becomes complicated when one's choices are ultimately determined by the requirements of comedic timing and dramatic structure. The Lost episode, known as The Fourth Wall, began on what appeared to be an ordinary Wednesday morning, when Gumball experienced a moment of unprecedented clarity about the nature of his existence, a sudden understanding that the repetitive patterns of his daily life, the way minor problems invariably escalated into major catastrophes before resolving themselves through improbable coincidences, and the manner in which his family's dysfunction somehow always remained, contained within acceptable parameters, suggested the influence of organizing principles that operated beyond the level of conscious choice or natural circumstance. The realization struck him not as a dramatic revelation, but rather as a gradual recognition of something that had always been present but never consciously acknowledged, like finally noticing the background music that had been playing throughout one's entire life, or recognizing the theatrical lighting that had been shaping the emotional tone of every significant moment, without ever being explicitly observed or commented upon by those who lived within its influence. Gumball's initial response to this awareness was characteristically enthusiastic, as he began experimenting with direct communication to whatever audience might be observing his adventures, addressing comments and questions to empty spaces in ways that initially alarmed his family members, who assumed he was experiencing some form of psychological breakdown or possibly developing imaginary friends as a response to social pressures they had failed to recognize or address adequately. But as Gumball's experiments with fourth-wall communication continued, other family members began to notice subtle confirmations of his apparently delusional behavior moments, when his comments to invisible observers seemed to be acknowledged through changes in lighting, background music, or the timing of events that suggested some form of responsive interaction with forces beyond their normal perception. Darwin's naturally philosophical disposition made him particularly receptive to Gumball's theories about their animated existence, and he began conducting his own careful observations of the patterns that governed their daily experiences, documenting the ways in which cause and effect operated according to principles that prioritized comedic impact over logical consistency, and noting the frequency with which their most chaotic adventures somehow concluded with everyone safe, intact, and having learned valuable lessons about themselves or their relationships. The lost episodes revealed that the family's growing awareness of their fictional nature did not diminish the authenticity of their emotions or the meaningfulness of their relationships, but rather created new opportunities for self-reflection and conscious participation in their own character development. Understanding that they existed within a narrative framework allowed them to make more intentional choices about how they wanted their stories to unfold, while also providing them with a sense of security that came from knowing that the organizing principles of their reality were fundamentally benevolent and oriented toward their long-term well-being and growth. The Lost episode documented the extraordinary day when the animation budget for their reality was temporarily exhausted, creating a crisis that revealed the underlying infrastructure of their existence, while also testing their ability to maintain their essential personalities and relationships under conditions of extreme stylistic constraint and reduced visual complexity. The budget crisis began subtly, with minor reductions in background detail and simplified character movements that most residents initially attributed to fatigue or distraction rather than systemic resource limitations. But as the day progressed, the economizing measures became more dramatic and harder to ignore, with elaborate action sequences being replaced by static images accompanied by voice-over narration, complex facial expressions giving way to simple geometric shapes that conveyed emotional states through color and basic configuration, and eventually entire scenes being reduced to minimal line drawings that retained only the most essential elements necessary for narrative comprehension. Rather than experiencing panic or existential crisis in response to these dramatic changes in their reality's presentation, the Watterson family adapted with remarkable resilience and creativity, discovering that their essential personalities and relationships could survive even the most extreme stylistic constraints because they were based on genuine emotional connections rather than superficial aesthetic elements. Gumball found that his optimism and enthusiasm remained intact regardless of whether he was rendered as a fully detailed character or a simple stick figure, while Darwin's philosophical nature and loving loyalty required no elaborate animation to express their fundamental authenticity. Nicole's competence and protective instincts operated just as effectively when conveyed through minimalist visual representation, and Richard's contentment and gentle wisdom needed no complex artistic interpretation to remain recognizable and endearing to those who knew him well. The budget crisis also revealed the extent to which their community had learned to find meaning and connection through interaction and communication, rather than through superficial appearances or impressive visual spectacles. Conversations retained their emotional impact even when conducted between characters who appeared as basic geometric shapes. Friendships continued to flourish, despite radical simplification of facial features and body language, and the essential humanity that characterized their relationships proved to be independent of the particular artistic style through which it was expressed. The lost episodes documented Gumball's direct conversations with the audience, moments of unprecedented intimacy and vulnerability when he would address the fourth wall not with his usual performative enthusiasm, but with genuine curiosity about the people who observed his life and found entertainment or meaning in his adventures and misadventures. These conversations revealed Gumball's deep appreciation for the opportunity to live a life that mattered to others, even if that mattering took the form of entertainment rather than direct personal relationship. He expressed gratitude for the attention and care that allowed his existence to continue, while also sharing his hopes that the stories of his family's adventures might provide some comfort or inspiration to people who were dealing with their own challenges and complications in realities that operated according to different but equally complex sets of rules and expectations. His direct addresses to the audience also revealed his understanding that the relationship between performer and observer was ultimately one of mutual benefit and shared humanity, with his family's willingness to live their lives openly and authentically, providing entertainment and perhaps insight to people whose own experiences might be enhanced or illuminated through exposure to different approaches to common problems and universal challenges. The lost episode known as The Show Must Go On explored what happened when several characters became simultaneously aware of their animated nature and began coordinating their responses to this knowledge, creating a form of collective consciousness about their fictional status that had implications for their ability to influence the direction and tone of their own narrative development. This group awareness began during a particularly chaotic day when multiple reality glitches occurred simultaneously, creating inconsistencies and continuity errors that were so obvious and widespread that even characters who normally accepted impossible events without question began to notice that something fundamental about their reality was operating incorrectly or had become temporarily unstable. The glitches manifested as characters appearing in multiple locations simultaneously, objects changing size and color without apparent cause, and conversations that seemed to repeat themselves with slight variations, as if reality was struggling to determine which version of events should be considered canonical. These disturbances created a shared recognition among the affected characters that their existence was subject to external forces and organizing principles that operated according to logic that differed from their everyday experience of cause and effect. Rather than creating panic or psychological breakdown, this shared awareness of their fictional nature brought the characters together in new forms of cooperation and mutual support, as they began working collectively to maintain narrative coherence and emotional authenticity. Despite their growing understanding of the constructed nature of their reality, the lost episodes revealed that the characters had developed sophisticated strategies for preserving the essential elements of their personalities and relationships, while also accommodating the requirements of comedic timing, dramatic structure, and audience engagement that shaped the parameters within which their choices and actions could unfold. These strategies included conscious participation in their own character development, deliberate cooperation with narrative requirements, while maintaining authentic emotional responses to events and circumstances, and careful attention to the ways their individual growth and relationship dynamics could serve both their own well-being and the entertainment or educational needs of the audiences who observed their adventures. The series of reality breaks that occurred during this period also revealed the existence of backup narrative systems and emergency protocols that activated automatically when the primary reality framework experienced technical difficulties or became temporarily unavailable due to resource limitations or systemic maintenance requirements. These backup systems, while less sophisticated and detailed than the normal reality infrastructure, provided sufficient stability and continuity to allow the characters to maintain their essential relationships and continue their emotional development, even under conditions of extreme stylistic or narrative constraint. The Lost episodes documented the crossover episodes that existed only in the character's awareness, meetings and interactions with beings from other animated realities that occurred in interdimensional spaces where different fictional universes briefly intersected, allowing characters from various narratives to compare experiences and share insights about the nature of animated existence and the responsibilities that came with serving entertainment functions for audiences whose own lives operated according to different principles and constraints. These crossover experiences provided the Watterson family with perspective on their own situation by allowing them to observe how other fictional characters had adapted to their roles within different types of narratives, from action-adventure stories that required constant physical conflict and dramatic tension to educational programs that prioritized information transmission over character development or emotional authenticity. The interactions with characters from other fictional frameworks helped the Wattersons appreciate the unique advantages of their particular narrative environment, where character development and relationship dynamics were prioritized over external conflict, where humor was used to explore genuine emotional and social issues rather than simply providing momentary distraction, and where the organizing principles of their reality seemed genuinely committed to their long-term happiness and growth rather than simply exploiting them for entertainment value. The Lost episodes concluded with the characters' collective decision to embrace their awareness of their fictional nature while continuing to live with the same emotional authenticity and commitment to growth that had always characterized their relationships and individual development. They understood that their knowledge of being observed and their awareness of existing within a narrative framework did not diminish the reality of their feelings or the importance of their choices, but rather added new dimensions of meaning to their existence. By connecting them to audiences who might find inspiration, comfort, or insight through exposure to their adventures and the ways they had learned to navigate the challenges and opportunities of life in an impossible but ultimately benevolent animated reality. Their final realization was that consciousness itself was perhaps the most important element of their existence, more fundamental than the particular physical laws that governed their reality or the specific narrative requirements that shaped their adventures, and that their capacity for love, growth, friendship, and meaning-making was not dependent upon conforming to conventional definitions of reality, but rather represented universal aspects of conscious existence that transcended the boundaries between fictional and non-fictional frameworks for organizing experience and understanding the nature of being itself. In the quiet moments that followed their full acceptance of their animated nature, the Watterson family found that their love for each other and their appreciation for their extraordinary life had deepened rather than diminished, enhanced by their understanding that they had been granted the rare privilege of existing in a reality specifically designed to support their happiness, growth, and the development of meaningful relationships that could serve as examples of hope and resilience for anyone who needed reminding that love, laughter, and family bonds could flourish under even the most unusual circumstances imaginable. In the gentle twilight of possibility that settles over every story, when its characters begin to sense the approaching conclusion of their documented adventures, there exists a bittersweet awareness that the end of official episodes does not necessarily mean the end of existence, but rather marks the transition from public narrative to private continuation, where the relationships and growth that have been carefully developed over years of shared experiences will continue to evolve in the quiet spaces beyond the reach of external observation, sustained by the love and understanding that have become the true foundation of everything that matters most. The Lost episode known as The Last Day began with what appeared to be an ordinary morning in the Watterson household, but carried within it an atmospheric quality that suggested significant change was approaching. not the dramatic upheaval that had characterized so many of their adventures, but rather the kind of gentle transformation that occurs when families reach natural transition points in their collective development and must adapt to new circumstances while preserving the essential bonds that have sustained them through all their previous challenges and celebrations. Nicole had received news from her company about a promotion opportunity that would require the family to relocate to a different city, a possibility that represented both professional advancement and personal growth, while also meaning that they would need to leave behind the community of Elmore that had become so integral to their understanding of home and belonging that the prospect of departure created complex emotions in every family member, ranging from excitement about new possibilities to sadness about leaving familiar places and established relationships. The decision facing the Watterson family was not simply about career advancement or financial improvement, but rather about the fundamental question of what constituted home and whether the love and understanding they had discovered together could survive transplantation to a new environment where they would need to rebuild their social connections and re-establish their place within a different community that might not be as accepting or understanding of their particular brand of chaos and impossibility. The lost episodes revealed that this potential move had been under consideration for several months, discussed in quiet conversations between Nicole and Richard during the late evening hours when their children were asleep, and they could explore the implications of such a major change without creating anxiety or uncertainty for family members who were still developing their own understanding of stability and continuity in their rapidly evolving lives. These private discussions had revealed the depth of Nicole and Richard's commitment to making decisions that prioritized their family's long-term well-being over immediate convenience or individual advantage, as they carefully weighed the potential benefits of new opportunities against the risks of disrupting the supportive community relationships and familiar environments that had provided crucial stability during some of their most challenging and transformative experiences. The couple had also spent considerable time discussing how to present this possibility to their children in ways that acknowledged their legitimate concerns about leaving friends and familiar places, while also helping them understand the ways in which change could create opportunities for new forms of growth and adventure that might ultimately enrich their lives in ways that were difficult to imagine from their current perspective. When the family meeting was finally called to discuss the potential move, each member brought their own perspectives and concerns to the conversation, creating a rich dialogue that demonstrated how much they had all grown in their ability to communicate honestly about complex emotions, while also supporting each other through difficult decisions that affected everyone, but could not be resolved through simple compromise or majority vote. Gumball's initial reaction was characteristic of his optimistic nature, as he immediately began imagining the adventures and new friendships that might await them in a different city, while also expressing genuine sadness about leaving behind the classmates and teachers who had become such important parts of his developing understanding of friendship, education, and community belonging. His relationship with Penny had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful than his early infatuation, growing into a genuine partnership based on mutual respect, shared interests, and emotional support that had helped both of them navigate the complex challenges of adolescent development with greater confidence and resilience than either might have achieved independently. The prospect of leaving Penny behind created the first truly serious romantic dilemma that Gumball had ever faced, forcing him to consider whether their relationship was strong enough to survive geographical separation, and whether his feelings for her were profound enough to influence his family's decision about their future. Questions that required a level of emotional maturity and self-knowledge that he was still developing, but that the situation demanded he access more quickly than his natural developmental timeline might have suggested. Darwin's response to the potential move revealed the philosophical depth that had always characterized his approach to major life changes, as he considered not only the practical implications of leaving Elmore, but also the existential questions about identity and continuity that arose when one's entire understanding of home and belonging was suddenly called into question by circumstances beyond individual control. His concerns focused particularly on whether his unique status as a goldfish, who had somehow become a full family member, would be understood and accepted in a new community that lacked the context of his transformation and the years' gradual adaptation that had allowed Elmore's residents to accept his impossible existence without constant questioning or scientific scrutiny that might threaten his psychological stability or his family relationships. Darwin's philosophical investigations had also led him to consider whether their family's particular form of dysfunction and their ability to find joy and meaning within chaos were characteristics that had been shaped by their specific environment and community relationships, or whether these qualities were inherent to their essential nature and would therefore remain intact regardless of their geographical location or social circumstances. Anais approached the potential move with the analytical thoroughness that characterized all her major decision-making processes, researching the educational opportunities, cultural resources, and intellectual communities that might be available in their potential new home, while also conducting careful cost-benefit analyses that considered both quantifiable factors and the more subjective elements of family happiness and social integration that were harder to measure, but equally important for long-term success and satisfaction. Her research had revealed both exciting possibilities for advanced educational opportunities that might be better suited to her exceptional intellectual abilities, and concerning gaps in the support systems and specialized resources that had helped her navigate the challenges of being a 4-year-old genius in a world that was not well equipped to understand or accommodate her unique educational and social needs. The lost episodes documented the family's exploration of their potential new home, a carefully planned visit that allowed them to experience the environment and community where they might be living, while also providing opportunities for each family member to evaluate how well their individual needs and preferences might be served by such a significant change in their circumstances. The new city proved to be both familiar and alien, sharing many characteristics with Elmore in terms of its acceptance of impossible biology and animated physics, while also possessing its own unique culture and social dynamics that would require adaptation and learning on everyone's part if they decided to make the transition from visitors to permanent residents. Gumball's exploration of the local school system revealed educational opportunities that were both exciting and intimidating, with more advanced programs and specialized resources that might challenge him in new ways, while also requiring him to prove himself to teachers and classmates who lacked the context of his previous achievements and growth within the familiar environment of Elmore Junior High School. The potential new school also contained students whose own impossible biologies and unique characteristics created a social environment that was simultaneously more diverse and more competitive than what he had experienced in Elmore, offering opportunities for new friendships and intellectual challenges, while also requiring him to develop new strategies for social navigation and academic success. Darwin's exploration of the new environment focused particularly on finding spaces and communities where his philosophical nature and his unique perspective as a fish-turned family member might be appreciated and understood by others who had their own complex relationships with identity, transformation, and the challenge of maintaining authenticity while adapting to social expectations and community norms. His discoveries included academic institutions and discussion groups that specialized in questions of consciousness, identity, and the nature of impossible existence, resources that might provide him with intellectual stimulation and emotional support, while also creating opportunities for him to contribute his own insights to ongoing research and philosophical investigation. The family's final decision about the move emerged not from any single decisive moment or overwhelming argument in favor of change, but rather from a gradual recognition that their love for each other and their commitment to supporting each other's growth and happiness were more fundamental to their identity as a family than any particular geographical location or community affiliation. They understood that home was not primarily about place, but about relationships, not about familiar environments, but about the love and understanding that allowed them to face new challenges with confidence, while maintaining the essential bonds that had sustained them through all their previous adventures and transformations. The lost episode, known as the never-ending story, revealed the family's realization that their documented adventures were concluding, not because their lives were ending, but because they had achieved a level of peace, stability, and mutual understanding that no longer required external validation or public observation to maintain its strength and meaning. Their final understanding was that the most important stories are often the ones that continue in private. The quiet moments of daily life, where love expresses itself through small gestures and routine kindnesses, where growth occurs through patient accumulation of experience rather than dramatic revelation, and where the deepest forms of happiness are found in the simple pleasure of being together and knowing that tomorrow will bring new opportunities for connection and discovery. As they prepared for whatever changes the future might hold, whether geographical relocation or continued life in Elmore, the Watterson family carried with them the knowledge that they had built something precious and enduring, a set of relationships based on unconditional love, mutual support, and the shared understanding that no challenge was insurmountable as long as they faced it together with honesty, creativity, and the unshakable conviction that their bond as a family was stronger than any obstacle that life might place in their path. Their legacy was not the chaos they had created or the problems they had solved, but rather the demonstration that families built on love rather than convenience, understanding rather than judgment, and acceptance rather than perfectionism could not only survive, but flourish in a world where the impossible was routine, and the only constant was the certainty that tomorrow would bring new adventures, requiring new forms of courage, creativity, and cooperation to navigate successfully.